There's a certain kind of silence you notice in the richest parts of a city. Not the peaceful kind, the eerie kind. The kind that sits behind perfect glass, 20 floors up, with no curtains moving and no lights turning on. Down on the sidewalk, people squeeze into tiny apartments, or sleep in cars, or bounce between friends' couches. Up above, whole floors sit empty, like the building is holding its breath. That's the contradiction that should bother all of us. We're told there's a housing shortage, so you'd think every new home would be fought over. But in a lot of global cities, the newest and shiniest homes aren't built for living. They're built for owning. They're built for the moment a wealthy buyer signs a contract, not the moment a family hangs a photo on the wall. In the United States, the government's count found 771,480 people experiencing homelessness on a single night in 2024. That number is a snapshot, not a guess. While that was happening, luxury developments kept rising in city after city, marketed like rare collectibles. When a system can produce record homelessness and record luxury construction at the same time, it's not just the cycle. It's a sign we're building the wrong thing for the wrong purpose. I'm going to use a phrase that sounds harsh, but it fits: safety deposit boxes in the sky. That's what a lot of luxury condos have become, not homes. Just wealth parked in concrete and steel because it feels safer than a bank account, safer than a stock chart, safer than leaving money in a place where the rules might change. And once housing becomes a hiding place for money, the people who actually need housing become an inconvenience. Here's how we got here in plain language. Housing used to be mostly about shelter. Over time, it turned into a financial product, a thing you buy not because you need it, but because you expect it to rise. The story stopped being, "Where will we live?" and became, "Where will my money grow?" That shift didn't happen by accident. Governments encouraged it, banks financed it, and developers learned how to turn it into an assembly line. Construction looks great on economic reports. New towers make leaders look like they're delivering growth. Even when the growth is hollow, it still looks shiny on paper. One of the quiet tricks that powers luxury condo building is pre-sales. In many places, developers sell units before the building is finished. Buyers put down deposits, and those contracts help the developer borrow more money. The building keeps moving because the money keeps moving. That creates a dependency. If you need the next round of buyers to keep the project alive, you start chasing buyers who aren't looking for a home. You chase investors, speculators, and anyone who believes they can flip the deal later for a profit. Canada's housing agency has warned about this. In Toronto, it reported that months of inventory for pre-construction condos in early 2025 were more than 14 times higher than in 2022, and at the current sales pace, it would take about 58 months to sell the available stock. That's not a small slowdown, that's the engine sputtering. Now imagine what that means on the ground. A project is planned when the market is hot, then the market cools, buyers back away. Some try to exit their contracts. Some can't close when the unit is finished because interest rates changed or the price no longer makes sense. You end up with a building full of paper promises and not enough real end users. This is where people start whispering Ponzi. Not always because every deal is illegal, but because the shape feels familiar. New money is needed to satisfy old expectations. New buyers are needed to justify last year's pricing. If the flow slows, the whole thing looks shaky. If all this were only about rich people making risky bets, it would still be infuriating, but it wouldn't threaten everyone. The problem is that luxury towers pull resources away from the real city. Land, labor, materials, financing, and political attention all get sucked into the highest profit end of the market. Meanwhile, the kinds of homes most people actually need get treated like a side project. Researchers have been blunt about the widening affordability squeeze and the fact that assistance has not kept pace with need. When costs rise faster than wages, you don't just get tight markets. You get families breaking apart, people delaying kids, older adults working longer, and a constant low-grade panic in everyday life. Now we have to talk about the global money piece, because it's the part that turns local pain into a worldwide machine. Real estate is one of the easiest places to store wealth quietly. Sometimes that's legal money looking for stability. Sometimes it's money that doesn't want questions. Either way, luxury property becomes a kind of global savings account, and ownership rules have often made it too easy to hide who is really behind a purchase. In the United States, the Corporate Transparency Act was meant to push beneficial ownership reporting, but in March 2025, FinCEN issued an interim final rule that removed beneficial ownership reporting requirements for U.S. companies and U.S. companies' persons, narrowing the scope mainly to certain foreign entities. That change matters because transparency only works when it covers the methods people actually use. In the United Kingdom, the Register of Overseas Entities was created to expose foreign ownership of UK property. But enforcement has struggled. Reporting has shown that fines for non-compliance were issued, yet only a small share was actually collected, which is what happens when rules exist but aren't backed with enough enforcement. And then there are trusts, which can hide real ownership behind layers of paperwork. Reporting has described how large amounts of property in England and Wales are held through opaque trust structures, making it harder to trace who truly owns what. When you can't see ownership, you can't truly police crime, corruption, or sanctions evasion. So here's the result of secrecy and global capital. Luxury homes stop behaving like homes. They behave like currency. When wealthy people are nervous about politics, markets, or their own governments, they park money in property in places they believe will protect it. London, New York, Miami, Toronto, Dubai. It becomes an escape hatch. But the city that hosts that wealth pays a price. The first price is community. Buildings with too many absentee owners don't feel like neighborhoods. They don't have the small, everyday bonds that make a place safe and human. They have security desks, dark windows, and a sense that nobody truly belongs. The second price is street life. When property values inflate from speculation, commercial rents climb too. Small businesses can't survive that. You lose the barber who knows your story. You lose the diner that hires teenagers for their first job. You lose the bookstore that hosts local writers. What replaces it is often nothing. Empty storefronts, for lease, signs, a hollow shell at sidewalk level. The third price is distance. The people who keep a city running, teachers, nurses, firefighters, service workers, get pushed farther away. You get long commutes and tired communities. A city can look wealthy while functioning like it's exhausted. And then there's the price that doesn't show up until later: risk. Luxury real estate is usually built on debt. Big debt. If values fall, that debt doesn't politely shrink. Investors can default, projects can stall, whole areas can end up dotted with zombie sites, partly built towers that sit there for years like monuments to a party that ended. Canada's condo warnings weren't only about prices. They were about the system behind the prices: investor-heavy demand, pre-construction dependence, and the possibility of sudden stress if buyers can't close. That kind of stress doesn't stay neatly contained inside the housing market. Dubai offers another version of the same temptation. When development is treated like a national growth engine, the pressure is to keep building, even when supply surges. Analysts have debated the risk of oversupply around 2025 and 2026. Whether the market absorbs it smoothly or not, the bigger point stands. When housing is used as a growth machine, it can turn volatile fast. In the USS, affordability has stayed tight for many people, even as different markets cool or heat at different speeds. In New York City, data used in rent guideline discussions ties vacancy and supply conditions directly to what people pay and whether they can stay. The numbers change, but the lived reality is simple. People feel squeezed, and a lot of families are one shock away from losing their housing. There's also the way the system is quietly subsidized. In some countries, the public spends enormous amounts through tax breaks that reward owning multiple properties, even when the same public struggles to fund social housing. In Australia, a major report said the country spent more on tax breaks for landlords than on social housing, homelessness services, and rent assistance combined. When policy rewards speculation more than shelter, the market listens. And behind the scenes, governments can get addicted to the numbers. Construction jobs, permit fees, property taxes, headlines about record investment. It can make an economy look strong, even if families are drowning. The easiest wins in politics are often the ones that photograph well, not the ones that keep people housed 5 years later. The financial system has its own reasons to look away. Real estate loans are big and they're everywhere. When prices rise, everyone feels smart. When prices fall, the damage spreads. US regulators regularly warn about real estate-related vulnerabilities because stress in property markets can spill into banks and the wider economy. That's why a luxury slump isn't only a rich person problem. It can turn into a jobs problem, a budget problem, and a stability problem for everyone. So what do we do with this? Because if we end it, it's broken. We've turned real pain into entertainment. One answer is straightforward: make it expensive to keep homes empty. If a unit is sitting dark year after year, that should cost money, because it costs the city in lost neighbors, lost businesses, and lost stability. Vancouver's empty homes tax is often brought up for a reason. The city's reporting has shown a very low declared vacant homes rate for the 2024 reference year, and a long-term drop in the number of homes declared vacant since the policy began. No single policy is a miracle, but it's proof that rules can change behavior. Another answer is real transparency, knowing who owns what, closing loopholes, funding enforcement, making it harder to hide behind shell structures and paperwork tricks. If leaders can find the resources to approve luxury towers, they can find the resources to enforce ownership rules. A third answer is to stop pretending the private market alone can solve housing. It can't. Not when profits push investment toward the highest return instead of the highest need. That's why you hear more people talking about social housing, community land trusts, mixed income development, and zoning changes that allow more everyday housing where jobs and transit already exist. And there's a cultural shift too. We have to stop treating housing like a trophy. A city's success shouldn't be measured by its skyline alone. It should be measured by whether normal people can live a normal life there without constant fear. Here's the bottom line. I can't escape. Housing is the stage for human life. When we turn that stage into a chip in a global casino, we don't just change prices. We change who gets to have a life in the city at all. That's why I'm calling it the Great Property Ponzi. Because the structure feeds on belief. The belief that prices must always rise, that the next buyer will always come, that money will always find a place to hide. But belief runs out. And when it does, the towers don't disappear. They just sit there, and the city has to live with the consequences. None of this is impossible to change. Around the world, housing is recognized as a basic human need, and cities have rebuilt themselves before. The question is whether we treat housing as a human system or as a betting table. So if you're listening and thinking, what can I actually do? Start with attention. Don't let this become background noise. Ask your local leaders who they're building for. Ask what they're doing about empty units. Ask how they're tracking ownership. Ask why workers have to commute hours to serve neighborhoods they can't live in. And if you want more stories like this, stories that connect the numbers to the lives behind them, subscribe to the channel. Not because it's trendy, not because it's a favor, but because this problem grows in the dark. The more people understand how the game works, the harder it becomes to run it quietly. A city is a living organism. It's made of routines and relationships, of late-night conversations and morning coffee runs, of kids on sidewalks and elders on park benches. If we keep sucking the life out of that organism for the sake of a spreadsheet, eventually there won't be a city left to save.